With the 20-year anniversary of 9/11 tomorrow, most Americans recognize this as a day of remembrance, a day we commemorate the infamous terrorist attack on American soil, a day where we should be able to come together unified as Americans to grieve the lives that were lost and honor those who also gave their lives to save others, a day where we can be proud to live in a nation where terrorism has no place, a nation where we can come back stronger and more unified over our love of country. But unfortunately, not everyone in this country feels that way. Campus Reform has covered numerous stories of woke students and professors showing the utmost disrespect for 9/11 remembrance, from tearing down 9/11 posters to sympathizing with Al-Qaeda to insisting we should stop obsessing over this solemn day. So we're going to be taking you through our top 5 9/11 stories today on the Campus Countdown. Buckle up and stick around to the end. It gets pretty intense and outrageous. In our number 5 story, PSU Berend student editorial blasts obsession with memorializing 9/11. The editorial board of the student newspaper at Pennsylvania State University Berend wants America to end its, quote, obsession with 9/11, asking in exasperation, will we never forget? The Berend Beacon published an editorial on September 12th claiming that, quote, the general consensus in the Beacon newsroom is that the U.S. needs to remember September 11th, but that our society's obsession with the day needs to fade. Observing that, quote, the majority of us have little to no memories of that day, but we have grown up with the consequences in the form of increased airport security, the Patriot Act, and hatred towards people that look anything remotely like terrorists, the editors go on to point out that there are plenty of other things in the country that were a result of the terrorist attack. The editorial board then critiques the use of the word war because it gives the impression that there is something that can be beat, declaring that the thing that caused 9/11 is not a specific thing that can be beat because it is an anti-American ideology. Ideologies cannot be beat. Yes, 9/11 was a devastating event, but there are disastrous things that happen in other countries on a daily basis of greater magnitude, the editors write, adding that the size of the event should not necessarily be the only factor that makes it more important, but comparatively, 9/11 affected relatively few people. The editorial concludes that by acknowledging that 9/11 was important, but must be viewed in the context of bigger issues taking place globally, saying, no one who experienced 9/11, whether directly or indirectly, will forget that day, but it is time to additionally face the problems that have come as a product. So these students are mad that Americans are obsessing over past tragedies. Would they say the same thing about the tragedy of slavery? Or what about Jim Crow segregation? Would they be mad if we obsessed over, say, the Pulse nightclub shooting or Columbine or any other mass shooting? Just curious. In our number 4 story, ISU professor assigns essay on 9/11 from Al-Qaeda's perspective. Write a paper that gives a historical account from 9/11 from the perspective of the terrorist network, the assignment description reads. In other words, how might Al-Qaeda or a non-Western historian describe what happened? Don't worry about the fact that you don't agree with the terrorists. The point of the exercise is to consider completely different perspectives. As you can see, the assignment was in no way an attempt to diminish the tragic events of September 11th, a spokesperson for ISU told The College Fix, nor was it designed to support the goals of Al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations. This is similar to the vital work being performed in our nation's diplomatic and intelligence operations, such as the Central Intelligence Agency or the State Department's Bureau of Intelligence and Research, the university added. There's a lot of things we can write about from other perspectives, but is this one really necessary? Why should we care to ponder about a radical terrorist's point of view as he killed thousands of Americans? In our number 3 story, UMN student government suggests that 9/11 remembrance would violate our safe space. The undergraduate student government at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities rejected a resolution for a moment of recognition on future anniversaries of September 11th terrorist attacks. Theo Manon, a student group representative to MSA for the College Republicans at UMN, introduced the resolution. The proposed resolution pointed out the university's lack of any sort of commemoration regarding the attacks on 9/11. It then called for a campus-wide moment of recognition on every September 11th from now on. Quote, I wrote this resolution because I think we need to recognize the victims of this world-changing event. The innocent men, women, and servicemen who died on that day deserve to be honored, Menon said. Nathan Amundsen serves as the president of UMN's Young Americans for Liberty chapter and student group representative for Right Things, a creative writing group. He said debate on the resolution centered around whether enacting the moment of recognition might install a more Islamophobic sentiment on campus. Quote, this resolution was non-controversial and was supported by MSA's president and VP. However, several members in exchanges with CR's Rep. Theo Menon were militant in their opposition due to a perceived bias towards Muslims. Other proponents of the resolution argued in forum that its passage could bring up controversial topics and that a healthy dialogue and campus tension reduction would ensue from the moment of recognition. At-large MSA representative and director of diversity and inclusion, David Al-Ghadi, voiced severe criticism of the resolution. He also made sure to emphasize 9/11's status as a national tragedy in his response. The passing of this resolution might make a space that is unsafe for students on campus even more unsafe, said Al-Ghadi. Islamophobia and racism fueled through that are alive and well. Al-Ghadi added that holding a moment of recognition over a tragedy committed by non-white perpetrators could increase racist attitudes on campus, asking, when will we start having moments of silence for all of the times white folks have done something terrible? So what they're saying is we should not recognize the thousands of slain 9/11 victims at the hands of radical Islamic terrorists because it might hurt some people's feelings. It's Islamophobic, apparently, to grieve the loss of American citizens because a group of Islamic terrorists were responsible for the attack. In our number 2 story, a professor tweeted, "Happy 9/11," and was condemned by the university, but he still doubled down on the tweet after the fact. A Northwestern University professor's 9/11 tweet was condemned by his university, which called his comments disgraceful. The professor, however, appears to be standing by his tweet and offering no apologies. On Wednesday's 18th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, Justin Martin, a journalism professor, tweeted, "Happy 9/11," claiming more than 8,441 civilians died in Yemen this year, helped by U.S. arms dealt to Saudi Arabia and UAE. The U.S. is complicit in far more terror than it has ever suffered, the professor wrote. University President Morton Shapiro and Provost Jonathan Holloway condemned the tweet in a Thursday news release, explaining that while Martin's views are his own, Northwestern finds it disgraceful that he makes light of the horrors of 9/11. This is insensitive and deeply disappointing, particularly on the anniversary of the terror attacks, the university said. In a follow-up tweet, Martin recalled an incident he witnessed in 2005 in Amman, Jordan, when Al-Qaeda bombed several hotels and killed dozens of people, adding that all terrorism should be denounced, not just in rich countries. Martin, just hours after the university statement, responded on Twitter saying, "I don't agree I made light of 9/11, but rather criticize disparity in how terror victims are acknowledged in different places. But I understand the tweet angered some." Oh. Well, I'm glad you understand why some people found that distasteful, Professor Martin. In our top story of the week, it's shocking but also not at the same time. What's shocking is that a professor tore down a 9/11 memorial posters. That's obviously terrible. But keep in mind, she was a gender studies professor, so that does offer a bit of clarity and context. If it was a criminal justice professor or something, I would be much more surprised, but then again, it is a gender studies professor, so it almost makes sense. Members of the Young Americans for Freedom chapter at Saddleback College had their 9/11 memorial posters ripped down and shredded by the chair of the school's history department. According to the New Guard, the students were participating in Young America Foundation 9/11 Never Forget project, which involves planting 2,977 American flags to remember the lives lost on 9/11. When they were accosted by the professor, who proceeded to rip down their posters and direct them to confine their activities to one of the free speech areas on campus. The students told Campus Reform the perpetrator was Margot Lavette, a gender studies and humanities professor who has a history of controversial actions on campus. Notably, OC Weekly reported in 2001 she had promulgated a statement by Black Radical Congress to her colleagues blaming U.S. imperialism for the 9/11 attacks. After ripping down the posters, Video footage of the incident reveals the professor came over to tell students that they were not allowed to put up posters on that part of campus. Let's take a look at that footage, by the way. We have it right here.
This professor is coming down 3 more. We've got a flag on it.
Are you guys responsible for putting these up there? Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah? You know, if you want, you're allowed to put posters up, but you need to get permission from student government to do that. Right? Otherwise, I have to take them down because they need a stamp from ASG on them. So that's why I'm taking them down, just so you understand. Okay? So you can go into the Student Services Center. It's the 2nd floor. There's a free speech area. Anybody can be there, but you can't put stuff in buildings.
Yep. Short, purple hair, sassy, it's all starting to come together, all starting to make sense. Now that we've suffered through all of that, I thought it would be nice to close with something a little more wholesome, close on a good note. This is a tweet from Representative Jim Jordan the other week. Quote, "Despite everything, America is still the greatest country in the world." Well, that's absolutely correct, Representative Jordan, if I do say so myself. Despite everything we see in the news, all the tragedies, all the crises, sometimes we need to take a step back and remember that despite all of those challenges that we face and are facing, we are still the strongest, most just, most equitable, least racist, most generous country in the history of the world, objectively. Keep that in mind as we go through these tumultuous times. Hope is a virtue, gratitude is a virtue, and love of country through thick and thin is certainly a virtue as well, and one that we should cling to. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment. I demand it, actually. And if you're not already, I also demand that you follow us on social media at Campus Reform on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Do that literally right now before you do anything else. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.